Everyone, today's session is about data ownership, about the citizen, and about entrepreneurs. So I want to start very clearly from the position, and I think I've said it before, but I want to just sort of lay some of the foundations, and then we can open to discuss some of these concepts. And I want to ensure that these foundations are correct, and you can challenge them all you wish, because I'm open to a lot of challenges. But let me tell you where I come from. I spent 6 to 8 years in defense, helping defense organization deliver on some of the most difficult contracts in the world. Some of you may have heard about what we call the 3-block war. Does anybody know that? So the 3-block war is a war. It's a sad thing that war is not a good thing. But in the old days, war was about full-scale military incursion. You go in and it's bang, bang, bang. Modern day warfare isn't going in and bang, bang, bang. Modern day warfare is the first block, and we mean the American block of buildings. First block being full-scale military incursion, so you go in and bang, bang, bang. But the second block after that is a humanitarian disaster. And the third block after that is peacekeeping. So within 3 blocks of a full-scale military incursion, you have children going to school. Now, that means the complexity of all the military assets at play, whether it's tanks, jets, or boots on ground, is tremendous. And what is needed usually is coordination. You get coordination wrong, people get hurt, people die. So what is used mostly in the days and the years before I started working on data ownership was data for coordination. And data was massively used to coordinate complex assets and people. Around 2011, coming off defense and decided to work on something a little bit more, less dramatic. I moved into the consumer Internet of Things space. The idea that when I looked at what was happening, climate change, at the time pre-COVID, we realized we really needed coordination that much. I saw that some of the biggest issues in the world could be solved with good coordination. What was the evidence of that? It was quite simple. Facebook and Twitter really put paid to the old Douglas Adams saying that bad news can travel really, really fast. And so you could put one meme and it travels across the world to millions and billions of people. What power that is to, if we could harness that for good. And I started to look at data because to coordinate with all markets, coordination are about property rights. You coordinate based on owning something and messaging to one another, not based on platforms that coordinate for you. That's a centralized system. But if you had ability to self-organize and self-coordinate, as individuals, we do. But then we quickly realized that on the internet, you couldn't do that because you didn't own any property rights. That's like saying the moment you leave your house, that pavement outside of your house is owned by Google. Mark Post had a wonderful saying, he's a historian. He said, the internet is not a hammer. It's not really a tool. You know, people think of it as a tool. It's not. Actually, he says, the internet is more like Germany. When you use a hammer, the hammer doesn't try to convert you. The internet does. It makes you a different person. So a hammer is a tool. The internet is Germany, because if you go to Germany, they'll try to make a German out of you. Just like if you come to England, we'll try to make an English overview in terms of its culture, its social, and its norms. The internet is a country. Imagine a country, therefore, where you step out the door and you have no property rights. You don't own a house. You don't own a place to stay. You don't own anything where you can stay in there and just not be seen. Imagine a country you cannot do that in. That is the internet. The second you enter, you use a browser. That's not a public good. You use someone's browser, some element of a service. You get into the internet and it's all private goods. There are no public goods on the internet. So in my world, we decided that, wait, if you wish to be a proper citizen of the internet, you must hold property. At the very least, you have the right to own yourself. You can't be slaves, but we are. As the whole saying about, if you're not being paid, you're the product kind of thing. So the idea behind that is we own some property, a place, a space of our own. We could transact better. We could keep our things in it. We can then give it away if we wanted to. We want to share it if we wanted to, like it is in civil society. So fundamental to all of what was designed since the beginning was around data ownership, because the legal ownership of your data was actually underpinning something more severe. Not the notion of data ownership, but just a very fundamental right to contract. You have no right to contract. You can't. You can with your fingers and your mouse, in the sense that someone sends you a DocuSign, you do an e-sign. You have the right to sign. That's very different from the right to contract. A right to contract means I can give you something, I rent you something, I lease you something, I can then contract with you. As citizens of a city, of a country, the internet sits alongside a physical environment where you have rights. And yet in the digital realm, we have none. We have rights only what I call second-class rights. Second-class rights is like slavery, in a sense that someone says you can do this, so you can do this. And so on the internet, we have with our data, which is basically, let's be very clear, the way we present ourselves on the internet is through data. There is no you on the internet, there's just your data, which is basically you. Therefore, we on the internet are our data. We are our digital selves, we are our digital twin. We therefore have no right to contract. The bits of it are everywhere, sitting everywhere, and we depend on organizations that hold it on our behalf to do the right thing and to consent for it to be moving around. So we have the right to sign, but we have no right to contract directly on our own for things that are owned by us. We therefore have no rights to property. So this is one of the things that we addressed. Over the course of £10 million of UK research money, we addressed that. We created a personal data server. We created data ownership, legal data ownership to be able to assign it properly, all sorts of things that was done in 2015-16. And this is where we are today, that you have a personal data server, which then turns to a personal data account. Personal data account is where you can put your data and you can license the data on. You can take Facebook data and give it to someone. Of course, it's not that simple, because like all banks, if you put your money in a bank, you expect it to be safe. You don't wake up in the middle of the night wondering whether or not your money is safe. You take it for granted it is. And so what we've been trying to create an infrastructure is that you should feel as though your data in the personal data account is safe. And you shouldn't have to think of managing your own data because you wouldn't be bothered. Just as you are with money, occasionally you go and look at your banking app, but usually that is to pay. And that's the same with data. And so we spent a lot of time building that infrastructure up to make sure that you have property rights, that you could be serving it to whatever the reason. Then on top of that bank data account infrastructure, you have to create a scheme, which is what we had to do. So we mirror the banking account system. It's all well and good to have a bank account, but if you don't have a scheme of which payments are made, you're not going to get the money out. So we had to create the scheme, much like BACS or CHAPS and SWIFT, you have to create the scheme. So we have to create the scheme, and it's a lot more complex in the data ownership world, because there's first-party data, second-party data, there's third-party data. You've got to acknowledge that third-party data comes in, transfer out. all of that, we built that into the scheme and made it scalable globally. And of course, in the process, we patented the technology. And therefore, DataSwift was born. So at the fundamental, whether or not it was technology, one of the things that I wanted to talk about so fundamentally is to say, what if there's no DataSwift? And you all see my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. With or without DataSwift, I wanted to talk about why are there commercial benefits to have that ownership to individuals. Wherever you get your technology from, what is the benefit of decentralizing that legal personal data ownership to individuals? Number one, there are websites out there just want to know that you're above 21 so that they can sell you alcohol. There are websites out there who need your age verified, income verified. They don't need to hold data. If you held it, you can present it, and if it's verified, that's enough. So we're not talking about being able you're talking about simple day-to-day things that if we held it, it could be used without an enterprise having to store. And whether the enterprise already have data may still want other data they don't have to store anymore. Once it's also decentralized to individual, it travels with us. It's shared by us. You can bring it with you on your phone through a QR code. You can verify your medical record. There's benefit to that mobility. Number three, once you have your data in your server and your personal data account, you can bundle it in different ways. The market can bundle and ask you for different things. You can separate the bits of it that's private, like your PII, your personal identifier, and give only that information. I'm allergic to peanut. I am vegan. You can give them without having to give your whole digital footprint or your whole identity. You can share with organization without very complex integration. You can take one organization A and bring me to organization B. I can take my clinical records from Cleveland Clinic and bring it to Malaysia because it's with me. And it's a store of value because in the future, you do not know what the data can be looked at. Today, guess what they do? Right to be forgotten, delete it. But in the future, they may be valuable. If we store it for ourselves, that's where the value could sit. So in just 5 simple ways of illustrating why decentralized personal data ownership matters, it's the same reason why decentralized personal bank account matters. So that someone doesn't hold your money. You go hold your money and you can pay as you wish. It's a very similar thing with data accounts and also with data ownership. So that's the commercial aspect that I want to ground and to say, this is good for business. And then start from there and say, okay, now this is good for business. Let's talk about how the city can make it good for business. Let's talk about how entrepreneurs can do incredibly wonderful things with business based on that ownership. What can we ask data for? What can we use data for? How else can we coordinate people now that we couldn't before because we needed to depend on the platform for coordination? So I want to open up. I know Joss has got lots of things to say. I want to hear from him. But also from everyone else who's joining. Come on, Joss, say something.
Yes, I agree with everything apart from one crucial thing. And I know you don't want to get into the ethics of it, but it kind of, for me, I think this is the point that you and I split. We agree on everything up to this point, and yet where we both want to get to is the same point. And for me, it's the fact that and I understand why. It's not that the technology that you're using, you've patented, and the idea that then the data that you're holding is then you're the guardians of the information into some regard. And this is where I find myself being challenged by the culture of first the utopian vision of people like Sir Tim Berners-Lee and Web 1.0 is that information was there to be shared, and yet at the same time that challenge, because we're using private services, as you point out, and the idea that business runs it, there's nothing free online, completely get that. But actually, if there is a way that the systems can be held for the common good, and this is where I find myself getting quite inspired by English history and the counter to the Enclosure Acts. And actually we go further back and we think about the Charter of the Forest, which was the second part to the Magna Carta. And we think about what is it that the common user citizen needs to live a sustainable life. And part of me feels that that should not be patented. But then you come back full circle, well, how are you going to pay for it? And how do you make it? Because it's got to make money and it's got to be sustainable. So at that point, you get into the discussions about open source versus data trusts, and what is private data and what is open data. And I completely agree with you that the way we unlock this is we make it commercial data. But the ethics of that and the governance of that is really important, because for me, I'm of the opinion that in a way that we have to reclaim the space of the internet. And that's my problem with stuff like Bitcoin and blockchain technologies, which haven't been patented, but there is no accountable figure to it as well. So you're then there, you've got two extremes of, you've got something like Facebook, which is heavily patented, or Google, and they're the centralization of the focus of the information. But then you've got something like blockchain technologies that it's very hard to account the central accountable figure. So where is the sweet spot in that regard? And I suppose I'm a bit of the utopian dreamer in that regard.
No, absolutely. I think you definitely voiced very, very good concerns. We, over the course of 5-6 years of research, tackled that design very cautiously, as you can imagine. First, I'd like to separate what the technology does and what the business does. So the infrastructure that's been patented is the infrastructure for legal data ownership. It doesn't say that we operate it. This is the infrastructure that can be operated by Citibank. It can be operated by a government. It's just that legal infrastructure now exists.
Wow, that's incredible.
Okay, that's all I'm saying. Okay, It's like saying previously there's no bank account infrastructure, now there is. Okay, come on, who's going to be the first bank? So, so the personal data account infrastructure with a scheme now exists. And we work very closely with a lot of companies or who wants to be the first issuers, and there are issuers that will be looking at it. And of course, they will go through it in great depth to understand what it is. Is it legally true? Is it, most of the problems I have is that just that's too good to be true, that kind of thing that I get. No, it's there. And the way I've separated the market was, we may be the technology infrastructure that built the damn thing, but we may not be the one to rightfully take it to market in the way that it's supposed to be taken to market. We are currently the operator, but it now opens a whole can of worms, because it means now it's legally possible and it's patented and it's possible. There's no stopping someone else to say, it's been done. So the beauty of human creativity is that once it's been done, and remember I said yesterday, someone's going to say to the how badly wrong that one is. The fact it now exists. Now, the second thing is, we do not own the data in there legally. That's a legal data server that belongs to the individual. Our biggest problem is, that's actually the mattress. If you just shut it in there, you just never use it. It basically is. The scheme was created for first-party data, second-party data, and that's why the data passports was created. Was literally to have an ability to share it safely through the scheme. And there will be services piled on that. I understand the ethics of it, but you do understand I do come from the dismal science. The basic assumptions of economics is that every human being is self-interested. It's a basic philosophy. Not that I agree. I am very positive. I don't necessarily agree with the dismal science in that way. But it takes that position, and therefore it makes no assumption about human beings and their ability to form groups that are for the common good when it's not logical. That's just the theoretical exposition. Yeah. But knowing that to be the case, if you look at English history, which is really good that you brought up Magna Carta and Forrest, there are usually circumstances to which it doesn't lend itself to acute capitalism or acute commercialism, because the institutional structure at that time already have baked in a social structure that doesn't quite freely catalyze them. So Britain has got a rich history of that. Therefore, to layer on top of it a charter, even at the point of Magna Carta, you've already have a lot of institutionalized social norms that says we should work together, there's the fiefdom, I mean, there's all sorts of grouping. If you look at it in the other way, you go to the New World of America, and where they first move over, what you then have is literally zero structure. When you go into a blank slate and you have to build up institutional structures like that, you can't make assumptions that human beings will self-organize in that way. You can make the assumptions when there's already a base institutional structure. You can't make that assumption when there isn't. In which case, then it can get pear-shaped pretty quickly.
Yeah. I like that likening, actually, of, I'd not thought of it, but it's bang on about the founding of America, colonizing America, let's say, to get the language right. Colonizing America and the way that the internet has been colonized in Web 1.0 and 2.0, and kind of starting from scratch. And those structures now are, and I find this is interesting about the Industrial Revolution, and every time that you see change, and the Charter of the Forest is a prime example of that, is there's that 60-year window where there's been an adoption of a technology of some kind that radically shifts the social structures, and people then go, hang on, we need to do something about this and redefine the boundaries. And that's why I think these sorts of conversations, and I'm so glad you come out of retirement from public speaking, because this is the moment now of that, after that 60-year adoption of the internet, and you know, we've got to, for anyone watching this, you know, kids and stuff, we've got to highlight that the internet was first a weapon. It was developed by DARPA. And I genuinely think that they didn't realize the system that they developed, which is why from the get-go it was intrinsically decentralized. If they'd realized the power of the weapon that they developed, it would all be centralized from the get-go. So yeah, and that's why it's so exciting. And yeah.
Look, here is where I bring it back to the city. The city of Illyria is a microcosm of the United States from a socioeconomic standpoint. It is also Ohio as a state. If you go, whenever I go there, it reminds me a lot of the Midlands.
It's amazing the Midlands travels that far.
Because it's strongly manufacturing, had a massive, massive history and tradition of manufacturing, have organizations that are really wanting to transform, have been slow at it. Maybe that's a good thing, because now they can actually leapfrog. But the idea behind why Illyria was really quite important for me, from the way we think of the psyche of cities and culture, was that the Midlands was the start of Industrial Revolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are now, and this is the conversations that Americans have daily, that future of the city, the future post-pandemic, the future that's digital and physical, that's now being seen. We can live and work from home and still interact. What is that future going to be? And that's why it's so exciting to be talking about Illyria, because we hear, we know the stories of cotton, industrial revolution, the steam engine, all from exactly at the Midlands.
Yeah.
All from the need to leap into a new age. And I see so excitedly in Illyria the need to leap to a new age. What is that new age? And what did the Midlands have to rely on? Entrepreneurs. People who took the steam engine, decided to export, could make new machines, could create things that were going to bring the next revolution. And today's session is all about that entrepreneur that is going to leapfrog from hopefully Illyria with an idea that will go and come together and say, the next revolution is data, because it's hybrid, physical, digital, it's technology. But what are these ideas? What are the things that is going to make it work? We have created an infrastructure where now coordination is important, is possible. You can now put layers of, like payment has enabled so many businesses to function, and data now sits in data accounts. What do you want to do with it? Use it as a sign-in for your business, use it to store your data and coordinate with other apps and business. All this now becomes completely possible. The infrastructure is now there, which is usually just looking and seeing what's interesting coming out. Because we can't build what's interesting. We are infrastructure. That's all we can do. We just wait and see. And we have been looking at some incredibly good ideas of what they could do now that data can move from my account to another account, self-coordinating groups, social groups, like what you're saying with the ticket. This now doesn't need any fancy big platform. You could self-organize, just get 10 people's personal data account, create an app, and you can coordinate. That all this becomes possible, which is why Kevin was always so excited, because he's doing that with recruitment of helicopter pilots and coordinating placements. And I think this is where ideas become really, really important. So if we had to say something to the entrepreneurs in Illyria and in Cleveland area, what should they build? Could we have some inspiration, ideas? I noticed that Tyler's here as well. I'm going to grab him to say a few words.
Sorry, I had to find the mute button. So I think the exciting parts the exciting part where we are right now is it doesn't need to be a mind-blowing application of data, because we are so early on in the process. It is a smaller, friction reducing bit of work that needs to happen first. So just a data passport that allows you to say that you're of age, like that's a really simple process that benefits both sides, because there's no data that goes across that boundary. Like, it's a really simple thing, and then we build on top of that. So we don't need the next internet. We don't need flying cars. Since we're so early on in data, the data economy, is we need those baby steps first. So I think anything that reduces friction. I like the City of Illyria's resident pass. So you want to reward people for keeping things local. So there's a moral guidance there, plus there's a benefit. So we need those little things to start building on top of those grains of sand to turn into pearls.
That's a great idea, actually, because I suppose the question is, if I had data to share, when would I share it? Why would I share it? never mind the angst that come from centralized world. This is truly mine. If it was really safe, what would I, how would I use it? And I think if it's a resident pass, I could get some free coffee out of it. It is showing you that my age, and it's not verified by me, but it's verified by someone else. And this is one of the things I found really useful that has unfortunately come out of COVID. We didn't want to have COVID, but COVID taught us that there's this thing called a COVID pass. It taught us that there's this thing called a pass that will get you to places. And if you start to think of the passes out there of what you would flash and what would you give to verify who, what, and when you are, and surprisingly, there are no such apps. It's like one pass takes $10 million to build because it's a COVID pass. Now, if it's decentralized and I hold on the passes, there are more apps that could. So if you had to share data, what would you be? And I think, Tyler, you're right. It's a grain of sand to say, I can now just do a pass and it's done. And I could have a second pass and it could be just as quick. One of the things the data passport does, and Illyria has a data passport, is to say it takes $10 million to create a COVID pass app. Actually, it takes you a week to come up with a new pass on the data passport. Now, that's the beauty of decentralization, because it comes from a data account. You can take any data. You don't have to keep building an app around any new data that you have to go and acquire. And now it's just the data account. You can put apps on top of it of whatever I have. And trust me, I can have a lot. I can bring my Facebook in, I can bring Instagram in, I can have my bank account. Now I have a lot. What are you going to give me?
Right.
What services would you give me now? Just because I now own this, what would you do? It's like saying, I have all this money. Where's my shopping center? Where do I spend this?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the ideas are lacking, because the world is so unused to this idea that I have it now. What service can you give me? It's just not thought of it that way. You don't think of apps that way. You think of apps that I want to build this. Now I got to go acquire these people. Rather than these people have this data, I can do a service for them. So one of the examples that have come up is journey. Journey through a city. My favorite example was someone said to me, hey, if you own all your location data, and without knowing who you are and what you are, if all 25,000 Progressive Insurance employees in the Cleveland area shared their 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock location data, you can see commuting journeys.
Right. So sorry, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think even the step before that, the really simple customer journeys or the buddy pass concept, like I take my car in to get serviced, and while I'm waiting, there is a corresponding pass or perk that allows me to go to the coffee shop that's a block away, because I'm getting my service done at XYZ Garage, I get a discount at the coffee shop. So even that really, really small, just 2-step journey is one piece that dovetails into the like larger en masse journeys. Just the really simple ones.
That's interesting, because that's actually quite fundamental. It's really good that you mentioned that, because we have our journeys, but the vertical centers of the world never see them all. They're like a snapshot, right? And so how many people have recommended, how many times have Amazon recommended the same thing that you just bought, right? Because they don't have a view of the journey. Now,
Exactly.
if you have your view of the journey, right? Someone can give me, and maybe this is what we were talking about yesterday, about flows, that the business models of flows, applications based on flows now can exist, because now I have my flows. And if you give me based on my journey, I'm going out for a 3-hour shopping trip. And now that journey, because I hold it, I can engage differently with the service, because it's a service that's based on a flow or a a verb, a journey that goes through time. I actually think that's quite fascinating because there aren't many of these linked apps, or because it's impossible.
It's too hard
to do it today. And so we have to tell everybody who's doing ideas for the city and hackathon is this is possible.
Yeah.
And I used to say, people ask me, I say, how do you start to create apps that are about links and about, you know, journeys and links? And I give all kinds of weird examples. My example that I give is, first, you have to think about a data that is a time series. And human beings don't have many time series data. Just think about it. We don't. But there are two that I'm very sure we have, can be collected, that is time series data. Number one is location. You are always somewhere, and you always are somewhere. And that's the time series data that is always in existence. So I call time series data a substrate, because above the substrate, you can land events.
Mm-hmm.
The substrate is important because they give you a continuity across the spectrum of which events then can land. So substrates are very, very important because they are time series, they are and it sort of goes across. Then you can land events, and you put on top of time series is always fascinating. The second substrate of human beings' data is pulse, heartbeat.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So now you have a second substrate, which is your heartbeat and the heart rate.
Right.
It's amazing how if you land events on top of two substrates, the context and contextual understanding of a human person is incredible.
Those two substrates, the timeline, or I guess the range, or maybe the granularity is also quite, the period is very short. So as these passports exist for a longer period of time, you then get another substrate, which is what you put life events on, like hiring, firing, kids, university.
Yes, those are events, right? Because
three.
Yeah. So you land the discrete events onto the substrates.
Mm-hmm.
I like to think about the substrates because they are the continuous hum of human existence. I'm sorry, I'm going to be very arty about this. There is a wonderful way we can think of a human being from a metaphysical and a physical standpoint. As a physicist, as an ex-physicist, my undergraduate degree was in physics. We always used to say that a person's location in a universe is bound by 4 dimensions, X, Y, Z, T. So you can locate anybody in XYZT. When we first created the personal data server, we had XYZTP. It was XYZ as physical, T is time, and P was perspective, which is where are you standing while looking at the person.
Oh.
So it was my way of wrapping a social science into a science to say all contexts are defined by XYZTP. And if you then bundle it in terms of data, this is like merging of science and social science and people and human being. Now, if you've got substrate and you've got data and you've got events, there are services that enable us to live life better. Simple one that says, let's help this journey for while I'm going there to service my car, you can give me a cup of coffee, whatever. Proximity in time, proximity in space, proximity of people. So many things you can do. So in the city environment, if you talk about it, I can, at the hackathon, I'm happy to contribute my Fitbit data, which I have tons of. I've been collecting it for 12 years more since Fitbit is in existence. Because I always believe that substrate is kind of exciting. And location, right? My PDA has been collecting location for 6 years. And so to me, I want history. Like at some point in time, I used to tell my friends that one day when AI or algorithms are so smart that I can actually use it for myself, what is going to be really lamentable is I have no history to give it.
Right. You can't, there's nothing to feed it to get that benefit. Yeah.
So I hoard my own data. For the fact that one day I tell my husband when I die, this thing with my data is going to continue to nag you.
I'm sure he's thrilled.
But that's what I mean. If you think about us as the manifested in data and how we manifested data, the context of how we manage data, so much imagination in structures, we cannot be beleaguered by the structures of today. Facebook collected it for advertising. Google collected it for a different reason. Your health records collected it. These are all the verticals that collected it differently. But once it enters the server and it sits on the substrate, a very different kind of value emerges in terms of humans and human society's interaction, bring it about us. And when you juxtapose these verticals together, you create a picture of what a human being is.
Right.
And now finally then say, oh, and therefore we can give you a very simple service, something really small that does this. Josh, you look a little bit like stunned.
No. I'm just working up how much confidence I have to kick back against what's just been discussed. I prefer to talk about data as you talk about verticals and horizontals. I'm trying to just define data spherically, and the fact that you've got the circular economy and all the greenwashing that goes on with that, but behind that there is a level of, as opposed to efficiency, to effectiveness. And the spherical sphere of the way that data flows around, in that it's both commercial, state, private, public, and everything. And that's where I find myself kind of like in that discussion, because there has to be a place for privacy, in the fact that I mean that it's my health records are mine. And when I die, I don't want to be remembered. And so but at what point, when we then look at, in the people that come after us, how do they then learn about the layers of knowledge that we've garnered? So then I come back, well, then there's got to be some sort of record, official records for me. And who has the right to hold that? And I hear what you say about, as soon as the data is on a server, it's commercial. Okay, but why? It's not
commercial.
But it's no longer ours, because it's shared on other systems in a way.
No, it's like on your PC. It shouldn't be shared at all unless you give.
Yeah, but there's still levels of supply chains of the data going on that you're sharing with other people. So what are the protections going on there when you're starting to share your personal data with other people? And the idea and passports, let's not forget, they're brought in during the Second World War, and then they wanted to expand them for the Spanish flu, and they couldn't expand them to mark because of the ethics at the time. And it's still the same now, of where is that information? That's where it's shifted for me. And I know we can go into a great detail of what is data and what is information. The way I like to determine information is when it becomes relatable and personable, because data is just numerical numbers that sit elsewhere, and it's until it is turned into some sort of reference, into an artifact, it's still just data, and then it becomes information. And that's the good. The fact that I'm having those kickbacks, I think, is good.
Yes.
And I would say to the hackathon, the thing I would talk about is, and this is direct and it's good that this is contradicting Tyler, is that it's be effective as opposed to be efficient. And I equate that to the space race, where from my reading of history, it was the question of what if. And we've kind of fallen into a psychological thing of like, what else? But when you question what if, you have the ability to dream and be the effectiveness that we need right now.
Agreed. I just want to clarify. when we do passes, you can actually give a pass without any identity. So, like you're allergic to nuts and things like that. And that's one of the reasons why we are pushing for zero PII passes, because you should be able to do that without having to give that identity away. But to pick up on what Teresa has been reminding us, can we talk about what kind of project ideas? And I like the idea of what you say, what if, because I think some of the project ideas can come up with on the what if. What if? So what are the what ifs that we can think of?
Well, I'm biased, but what if we shift from a consumption economy to a transfer economy?
Oh, a transfer economy. What is a transfer economy? Is that transfer of information?
Yeah, so a transfer of stuff, and all our modern day metrics are based on the consumption of stuff. And we know all the challenges of inequality, climate change. Like you say in your book, the average person has 1,500 pieces of stuff. We are consuming, and the Suez Canal was a prime example of it. Was just stuff stuck in stuff. And actually, if we start to think about the transfer economy, we can then start thinking about how we transfer between augmented and physical space.
That's a great idea. So what if we stop buying?
No, we can never stop buying.
And what if the city coordinated the greatest rent and lease of objects possible? Everything from the gardening tools, whenever you need it, a drone will pick it up and send it to the other house. I'm just imagining, okay? I'm just saying that I had this as a grant idea to say that we should be able to transfer washing machine to different households because they will wash at different days of the week. And if we could do that across everything, if coordination comes all the way down, then why would we buy? We would just say, who has a spade? Who has a lawnmower? We would just coordinate everything.
But I think there's also a beauty in there in the fact, I think there is a beauty that people like to hold what they have. And I think, but with the power of data is that what do you do when all that stuff, when you die, is that it either gets thrown out or sold for peanuts. And it's the same with building materials. You look at buildings being put up. Actually, if we can start attaching data IDs to every piece of building material, that can then become part of a sustainable economy, that you build the building and when you collapse it, you can then sell on the building materials instead of wasting it. And then you can still see the transfer economy from inception of resource extraction to then building whatever happens there, and then the sell on after that. So that then you're no longer just saying, oh, utopian sharing caring, to actually thinking about the very personal thing that people do like to own stuff. And like Guy Standing talks about, is this precarious economy that we have, where we are we don't even own the space that we're standing on, and for me that's not right. In a way, there's got to be a level of common openness, but that balance, and that's where land rights start coming in, and they're so old in the way that we transfer and share stuff today. And then you think about going for a walk in the forest, that forest is not just the pleasure of walking through it anymore. We now know how much of an impact that has on global climate change and holding of carbon. And that forest has a value, not just to me enjoying the atmosphere, but also to the global shared economy as well.
That's actually a good point. I think some of the ideas that come out is about what if things were transferred, what were things were leased, what were things were left when we die, how will we keep the things that want to be remembered by, but also we don't want to be remembered by. And I guess I think the city has a really interesting role here, because they become a central focus of coordination where these things can happen. You could try it out with the city, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
I have the model as well, if people want to know.
You've got to join.
No, Frank, come at me.
So you're going to join the hackathon as a speaker and the mentor.
Yeah, happily. Yeah.
Now we'll send you something. Thank you so much, Josh. Thanks, everybody. I don't know whether everybody has got enough, but certainly thank you so much. And I think tomorrow will be the last day where we will. Oh, tomorrow is a dev one, right, Tyler?
I think so.
And that's your show.
Oh, all right. Today I learned.
Yes. Okay, gotta go. But thanks so much for the discussion. And I look forward to, if not tomorrow, next week.
Brilliant. Cheers all. Thank you.
Bye.